Time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Another one of those days where I go, boy, I love Joe Biden. I love that guy, Uncle Joe. This is why happy he's in the White House. The headlines were all accurate, absolutely accurate. Joe Biden did have an off-color moment. Everyone attacked him, everyone throwing it out there. And the headlines are accurate. Joe Biden did, in fact, say to a stupid question, Fox hack reporter Peter Doocy, on the way out of the room, shouted out, "Do you think inflation is a political liability ahead of the midterms?" And Joe Biden, I got to think he knew the microphones were on. I got to think it. But in a very sarcastic kind of way, like one of those under his breath kind of things that, yeah, it's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid SOB. And I'm going, yeah, I could not agree more. Thank you, Joe, for what the rest of us were thinking. The only part of the stories that are inaccurate are the ones that are calling Peter Doocy a journalist. That's the part that's inaccurate. He's a Fox shill. He's only there to pump out the outrage candy. And good on Joe. It's about time. This is the Joe Biden that I want to see. Someone who's going to ball up the little digits and mix it up. At the end of the day, Democrats have been way too weak. Democrats have been absorbing blows and not fighting back. Maybe this is the time. Maybe this is the moment where Joe Biden has had, I've had enough of this. Enough of the bipartisanship, enough of the stuff that isn't coming. Maybe the reality that the Republican Party is never going to work with him no matter what he does has finally sunk in. And maybe now it's about, getting something done over the next couple of months, or at least appearing to be a little more muscular. And look, we're going to need that going forward because as a country, we're in a weird moment. Because internationally, thanks to the former guy and thanks to our weakness on Russia over the decades, you've got a very motivated Vladimir Putin who thinks that this is the moment. He thinks the country's weak. He thinks we're divided, and he's buying the right-wing outrage candy of, Joe Biden's weak. And this is a moment where we need to rise up. And again, what's going on in Ukraine? Sorry, not Biden's fault. We want to blame someone. Blame the former guy. Blame the guy before him and the guy before him. And I don't even blame Obama that much, simply because the Republicans were really willing to throw him under the bus. So we're in this weird moment that, from the moment that George W. Bush looked into Putin's soul and took their little drive around in that little midget car of Putin's, we've been heading towards this path. And sadly, who knows where this is going to go. And in this coming week, we're going to be talking a bunch about this as well. More interesting news from the defeated former guy. He's pretty upset. That the January 6th committee had the audacity to ask his daughter to come and testify. In fact, today he was screaming about how they have no morals. They'll come after the children. Yeah, she's a 40-year-old woman who was your main advisor. You, if anyone, put her in this position. If you wanted to shield the children, you shouldn't have put them in official capacity kind of jobs. Should have done like you did with Barron. Let the wife go run off wherever and take the kid with her. But no, didn't do that. Some good news coming out of Fulton County, Georgia. A panel of judges have cleared the way for a special grand jury. You remember the phone call? I'm sure we've all heard the audio where Trump called Brad Raffensperger and said, "Hey, I need 11,780 votes. Find them." I guess he thought they would just be laying around in the Secretary of State's, couch cushions. He could just dig them right up. And I got to wonder how many of these other phone calls were had. But in Georgia, this special grand jury is going to be part of the District Attorney Fannie Willis's investigation. And this, if of all of the stuff going on, of all of the stuff Trump's involved in, from his business stuff to January 6th, this is the most dangerous. This is for him the most dangerous. The one that could actually get him, I don't know, a slap on the wrist. I'm not going as far as saying jail, although he should be, but something should come out of this, which is why Republicans are going full tilt boogie on the midterms in hope that they're going to be able to take control of the House and Senate, and then they will show us. And I think Gingrich's comments on the January 6th committee kind of interesting, because he's going on and saying, well, when Republicans take Congress, it's going to come crashing down, and they're going to find out because we're going to put them all in jail. This is what authoritarians do. So again, it's voting time. When it comes around, make sure you're registered. Make sure you get out to vote. And I liked what Liz Cheney tweeted out. Basically saying that what Gingrich was saying is, this is what it looks like when the rule of law unravels, when there are no norms, when no one is being held accountable. And this is why I've been just beyond myself for the last year, going, why aren't we getting these people locked up? Why aren't there more of them? Why haven't we gotten the moneyed interest? Why haven't we locked them up yet? Why are there people still walking free? I know, Rick, the wheels of justice grind slowly. I get that. But the committee, we should be much further down the road. And I know. You don't want to give away too much information. I get all the excuses. We need movement quicker. Some good news on the worker front. And this is one of those stories I followed over the weekend that just, really, are we in America now? For background, Thursday evening, a bunch of workers from this ThedaCare company, healthcare hospital workers at this ThedaCare, 7 of them, decided that they were going to take another job. They were going to leave this ThedaCare and they were going to move to Ascension, another hospital, another medical facility, and they were going to go. And instead of the hospital, this ThedaCare hospital, saying no, don't go. Here's something better. Here's we're gonna meet your demands. We're gonna listen. We're gonna treat you better. Pie on Thursdays. Something to entice them to stay. They said no, we're not gonna bother that. We're gonna get our lawyers and we're gonna go to court and get an injunction so that they can't leave. And I'm going, wait a second, did I miss something here? Now, they allege, for those who hadn't followed this, they allege that this Ascension healthcare system came over and tried to poach these workers, which even still, freedom of movement. Now, the judge last week, temporary injunction, said, no, you can't leave just yet, because I still don't know why. Over the weekend, these people couldn't take this other job, but this Judge McGinnis ruled that, not yet, urged the two parties to come to an agreement. And look, if I'm the Ascension Healthcare people, I'm going, look, these folks came to us. We hired them. They should be able to start. This is how this game is played. Today, he comes out and he says the workers can be free to go work somewhere else. How wonderful that is that a judge gratefully told these workers that they can go work where they would like to work. That is remarkable. But it's kind of the world that we're in at this moment. Now, clearly this ThedaCare place, they've got some problems. They had to cancel all of their non-emergency surgeries. They had to cancel a bunch of stuff, and they had to go scramble to find people. Now, this is one of those situations where if you're in healthcare, you could be negotiating yourself and your coworkers some pretty decent things, because 1 in 5, I found it actually kind of low. 1 in 5 healthcare workers have left the job and left gone, which, wow. And you go, if the kind of wages that healthcare workers are getting, now understand, right now they're overworked, they're understaffed, they're being treated horribly, but they do make a reasonable living. If they're going to be going to the courts to demand that people don't leave their jobs, unfortunately, it didn't happen. They eventually said, no, you can go. But the fact that corporate America, that's their first inclination, tells you where we are as a nation. It's not about trying to make people's lives better. It's not about trying to improve conditions or want you to stay. It's about forcing you and being used to you being forced to stay in these positions. Which is why when I saw this AP story this morning from Elkview, West Virginia, it's about some workers who work in a fast food restaurant. It's this biscuit place, Biscuit World, which in West Virginia, I'm told, kind of a big deal. But the story went into about these workers who've been treated like garbage, poorly paid, overworked, understaffed, all of this stuff, and them finally going, we need a union. And this is one of those moments where you go, the light bulb finally went on. In West Virginia, basically, a place where if you're in your 50s and 60s, you knew people who fought in the Cold Wars. You had relatives who had, the stories of being bludgeoned on a picket line by the National Guard. You heard the stories of the miners trying to, survive. And then turning those jobs into good, solid, middle income, middle wage jobs that supported a family with good health care, good retirement, and some safety standards. So you learned the lessons of people's lives getting better because, well, they came together. This story is kind of like in that vein where the people are going, hey, wait a second, our heritage is steeped in this idea that collective action can make lives better. And now this fast food restaurant is in the process of organizing in this tiny little town in West Virginia, about 2,000 people there. And, you get into the story and it's the same thing in backwaters nowhere in West Virginia as it is in Bessemer, Alabama, or New York City, where these companies get away with harassing, intimidating, threatening, doing all these horrible things that our laws just continue to allow them to get away with. And this is where, again, I come back to our Supreme Court. We're led to believe, we're a country of laws, that, we're free, all this stuff. And yet, what happens? I'm waiting for a fast food place to come and say, no, you can't work anywhere else. You've got to work for me. Oh, that's right. They did try. You remember a couple years ago when Jimmy John's, the sandwich shop, made their sandwich makers sign non-compete agreements, which means that they couldn't go work in a restaurant making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because, well, bread and everything between is proprietary information, according to the non-compete that minimum wage workers were forced to sign. This is how corporate America strangleholds people into these situations. And I'll tell you, I'm hoping beyond hope, that people rise up and say, no more. I'm hoping. And I'm hoping in a place like West Virginia, people go, hey, Senator Manchin, this is the place where labor was basically birthed, where the fight for a middle-class existence, the fight for dignity and respect was our heritage. Not that stupid flag with the big blue X, but fighting for better opportunities for ourselves, for our children, for our communities. This most recent study put out, the impact of a poverty reduction intervention on infant brain activity. That's what it's called, published by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And they found, shocking, oh my God, shocking. They found that feeding kids, here it comes, helps their brains. Who knew? Who could have possibly known that if you feed infants, that they're going to have better brain activity, that they're going to thrive, that they're going to do better? Who could have possibly imagined that? Hold on, wait a second. Oh yeah, anyone with a rational, thoughtful brain. And yet what we've got is this past January 15th, the first time that check didn't go out to give us, especially folks on the bottom end of the socioeconomic ladder, the security of ensuring that there's a little bit of income to help feed those children. Now they go through this thing and say, well, this casual, impact study on poverty reduction intervention, on early childhood folks, and a lot of jargon that goes into it. It was basically just going, hey, we gave poor people some money. Poor people spend it the way they were supposed to on food and on shelter and on things that they need. And it made, oh my gosh, it made a difference. It made someone's life better. And this is where I keep coming back to reality. All of the things that divide us, all of the things that are meant to pit us against one another, the one constant for me is always coming back to wages, hours, conditions. How do we take care of ourselves, our children, and our families? How do we make sure that we take care of our communities? And how do we do that? Well, we do it through our work. Work has dignity, work has value, work should be respected. Kind of my wheelhouse. I believe all of our problems can be solved with a robust economy designed to help lift people up instead of keeping us in poverty, like a healthcare system going to court to force workers to work for them, like a fast food place making people signing non-compete agreements to where they can't even make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich somewhere else. That's what I'm talking about. We need labor law reform, and in the worst way. And when you've got senators like Manchin and Sinema, when you've got people who are standing in the way of feeding children, I mean, you hear Donald Trump going, they're going to go after the children. I don't care about your 40-year-old daughter and the crimes that she committed just yet. I'm worried about those kids who aren't, this month, aren't going to get the nutrition that they need to help them thrive, aren't going to get what they need now so that they don't succeed later, that they have deficiencies later, and it costs us much more down the road, and all kinds of remedial costs and catch-up programs that, you know what, sadly, those don't get funded either. I'm of the mindset that we need to be investing in people early, often, and help people on the bottom rise up, because we'll all do better then. But we've still got Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. Elections have consequences. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of our program, podcast. Get the podcast at the website, thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse going to be here to share some thoughts on work in America and, well, big dark money and the corrosive effects. Back after this.
Fellow Americans, 1 year ago today, democracy was attacked. Those who stormed this Capitol and those who called on them to do so held a dagger at the throat of America. They want to rule or they will ruin. Ruin what our country fought for at Lexington and Concord, at Gettysburg and Omaha Beach, Seneca Falls, Selma, Alabama. The right to vote, the right to govern ourselves, the right to determine our own destiny. You can't love your country only when you win. This is not a land of kings or dictators or autocrats, so we have to be firm, resolute, and unyielding in our defense of the right to vote and to have that vote counted. I will stand in this breach. I will defend this nation because we have a shared belief in democracy. Anything is possible. Anything. God bless you all, and God bless those who stand watch over our democracy.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Howard from Chicago sent me an email recently, and one of those things that I find quite interesting, because how I've been saying for the longest time that Joe Biden has been the most pro-worker president of my lifetime, and Howard wanted to make an argument for Donald Trump, and I guess this is one of those moments where you go, if something affects your life and your life's been made better, maybe this is it. And he pointed out that Donald Trump was the guy who got the raise in the overtime threshold. If you remember, overtime 23.6 is what it was before they could exempt you from overtime, which meant you could work 100 hours a week for 23.6 a year, as long as they gave you a nice little title. Well, Donald Trump got it raised up to 35,000, and for this, Howard was eternally grateful. But Howard didn't quite understand that what Trump had done was cut his raise in half, because Obama actually wanted to raise it to 47,000. And this is, again, another one of those weird moments where facts matter and what you understand matters as well. And again, we went through a whole process of why I thought Donald Trump was the worst president for working people. And the big part of it was the Janus decision. He's the guy who appointed Neil Gorsuch, who finally made the decision to make the entire country a no rights at work country for public sector workers. And here to share some thoughts on that decision and maybe make the argument of why Joe Biden could be the greatest president for working people ever. I've asked Sheldon Whitehouse to come talk with us. Sheldon Whitehouse is the senator from the great state of Rhode Island. Senator, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be with you, Rick. I appreciate you having me on.
So I'm looking at this conversation I have with Howard, and Howard is he's very into it. I got a raise, and it was Donald Trump who got something for me, and that's all he saw. And I think that happens with a lot of people.
Yeah, well, a lot of what gets done to working people is done behind the scenes and done through undemocratic means. And that's really our topic today with the Supreme Court, I guess, huh?
Yeah. Now, the argument that I made to him, and look, the Janus decision was not the first assault by the Supreme Court. I've said for the longest time, our Supreme Court is not a conservative court, it's a corporate court. The moneyed interests seem to always get what they want, and silencing the voice of workers has always been high on their list. And this Janus decision, which very few people heard of at the time, and still very few people have heard of, is one of the centerpieces of the assault on organized labor and working class people in this country. Now, you were at the center of this. You actually were part of filing an amicus brief against it. Walk us through what, from your perspective, what the case was about, and ultimately what you think it accomplished or didn't accomplish.
So there are four cases you need to keep in mind, because this is not just a case, it's a little story, it's a saga. The first case is called Abood. The second case is called Knox. The third case is called Friedrichs. And the grand finale was Janus. What Abood did is it said that if you're a public union and you are representing a group that's larger than your membership, the non-members have to kick in a contribution for the benefits that you negotiate for them. Fair deal. The court had supported it for a long time. Even Justice Scalia had agreed with it. That was the state of the law. Then comes Justice Alito. And in the second case, Knox, he sends up a little flare saying, I really don't like this Abood rule very much. Somebody ought to think about challenging that to us, which was a signal that the right wing instantly responded to in Friedrichs. So they brought a case, they rushed it to the Supreme Court. Literally, Rick, they went into the district court and the appellate court and said, please rule against me quick as you can. I'm here to lose. I've been a lawyer a long time. I've never heard of lawyers coming into a court and saying, hey, I'm here to lose. But they knew they had a friendly ear at the Supreme Court. They were trying to get there as quickly as they possibly could. They rushed the case up there, and then boom, wouldn't you know it, Justice Scalia died before the decision could come out. So they didn't have a 5-4 majority any longer. 4-4 tied, went to the runner. The decision had gone the other way in the Ninth Circuit. So all their plans blew up. Then comes Gorsuch, as you mentioned. As soon as he's on the court, back they come again. Same high speed, we want to lose as quickly as possible litigation strategy. Same plaintiff of convenience. Indeed, they filed the case before Mr. Janus actually became a plaintiff. So they're clearly just using the plaintiffs like little chess pieces to move the case to the court. They get up to the court, and of course, they got what they had hoped for in Friedrichs, bingo, a 5-4 decision, taking a shot at public employee unions by no longer allowing them to be compensated for the work they do, essentially requiring them to work for free for the non-union members. And across that saga, you saw a constant flow of dark money front groups, very often with a common funder behind them, so that what you saw in the courtroom was just the tip of the iceberg, and most of the action was going on out of sight.
No, you're absolutely right. I still remember the clip of Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin, and the construction billionaire Diane Hendricks, and her asking, and in the most frenzied of way, when do we get right to work? When do we get to pass this assault on labor? Now, that was in the private sector. This in the public sector took states' rights away, took all that away, and overdid, as you said, in the Abood decision, 40 plus years of decided law. And I hearken back to John Roberts, saying, hey, we're going to call balls and strikes. I believe in decided law, stare decisis, all this stuff. And out of whole cloth, they dreamt up a whole new decision.
Yeah, they've got an interesting view of precedent on the right wing of the court, which is that they're all for precedent, and the importance of precedent while they're having to be confirmed and having to go through the rituals of the confirmation process. But once they get on the court, the respect for precedent, including this 40-year-old precedent upon which states, municipalities, counties had relied, had built their labor contracts, it had really been embedded. They blew all that up, really at the behest of a right-wing group called the Bradley Foundation.
And really, it comes back to the Olin foundations, the Bradley foundations, the Koch brothers' money, all of this billionaire money, and it's amazing how we give tax cuts and created the largest billionaire class in history. And we're told they're smart, they know what to do with the money, Senator, and they do. They assault working people, they move jobs overseas, and they enrich themselves at the expense of the people who actually created the wealth in this country and built it. And now we're in this moment where now there's this great resignation going on, and people are going, hey, we're not putting up with this anymore. We're not taking these crappy jobs. And now we've got them going to the courts and literally wanting the courts to not allow people to quit jobs because it would be injurious to their businesses, which is just incredible to me.
Yeah, the maneuvering behind the scenes is the thing that is quite remarkable. If you go back to Friedrichs and Janus, those cases that were rushed to the court, the lawyers who went into the court saying, please, can I lose, and quickly, they were right-wing special interest groups. And the one that was the lawyer for Mrs. Friedrichs came back in the Janus case as a friend of the court to argue the same point. And the ones that represented Mr. Janus had been friends of the court in Friedrichs. They just switched hats. And if you look at the case, there were, I want to say, 14 amicus groups that all came in, that were all funded by the Bradley Foundation, that never disclosed their common funding, and pretended to the court that this was this sort of manifestation of broad and multiple support, when in fact it's all tentacles of the same big squid, which is the Bradley Foundation.
But isn't that the entire right-wing framework? And this is where the right does this much better than the left does. The right has built an incredible infrastructure. Their state policy network of think tanks all across the country, the incestuous pool of information that they create and then regurgitate through their media. They have really built an echo chamber second to none. And again, it comes back to it's this billionaire money that has created this environment of misinformation and, well, distortion and lies. Let's just call it what it is. That's got people like Howard who are thrilled that they got a little bit of a raise instead of what they should have gotten and what they should have been entitled to. And poor Howard, he's grateful for the crumb he got.
Yeah. And the deliberateness of it is really plain. There was a memo out of the Bradley Foundation that was leaked talking about their funding of these briefs. And they said it is very important to orchestrate high caliber amicus efforts, plural, that showcase respected high profile parties who are represented by the very best lawyers with strong ties to the court, and they confessed that Bradley had what they called previous philanthropic investments in the actual underlying legal actions. So they're on all sides of this, manipulating these front groups into positions. And I'll confess to you, Rick, that I think one of our worst failing as Democrats has been that we've done a terrible job at showing the public what's really going on here. It looks like there are 14 legit interest groups coming in, filing amicus briefs. Nobody really gets the joke that it's the Bradley Foundation and the right-wing billionaires around it that are pulling the strings for the whole damn operation.
Yeah, we used to have Lisa Graves on from the Center for Media and Democracy all the time talking about this, because it's that pool of money. It's that billionaire money that allows all of this other stuff. It's all of it. It's the assault on workers. It's the assault on women. It's the assault on inequality. It's the assault on, well, the 20th century, as I've been saying. They want to take us back to the good old days of the 80s and 90s, and not the 1980s and 90s.
Yeah, I did a appendix, a graph in one of my Supreme Court briefs that showed all the common funding of the front group briefs taking the other side. And Center for Media and Democracy took a look at that and said, bet you we can do better. And they did. They did an even deeper dive into who was funding all of these different groups. So I'm a big fan of Center for Media and Democracy. They do a great job. We as Democrats don't do a great job of letting everybody know what their work is showing us.
No, you're so spot on, and this is why, with all the stuff that's going on around the January 6th committee and all of the information about what we're finding out about January 6th, I from the beginning have said I don't care about the guy who defecated on the floor. We'll hold him accountable. The guy who urinated on the desk, we'll get them. What I want is the moneyed interest who funded all of this. I want the people who paid for the buses. I want the people who put these groups together, who filled these people's minds with disinformation and lies, to enrage them to the point to where they were willing to kill police officers in our capital. Those are the people we really need to go after.
Yes. Some call that aiding and abetting. Some call it being a co-conspirator. Some call it being an accessory before or after the fact. There are a lot of legal doctrines that I very much hope the Department of Justice is pursuing to look beyond just the people who showed up at the Capitol that day and look at the people who were basically the kingpins, the funders, the organizers, and the orchestrators.
Absolutely. And again, it come back to I want those people held responsible and exposed on all of these fronts. And this is why I brought Howard up in this whole thing, because Howard, he feels grateful for the little bit he got. He doesn't realize how these billionaires who have been telling him for all these years, you don't need those stinking unions. You're your own boss. You're an individual. You're all this stuff. And how his life has gotten worse and worse over the years. And his work has gotten harder and longer. And I keep coming back to this moment. He was grateful to Trump for that little bit of an increase. And this is where I reach out to my Democrats and I go, reality, Senator, we got to make people's lives better. We need legislation to move that's going to help families. It's going to make for opportunities for our children, because that's what people need more than the rhetoric that they're being fed in the outrage candy that they're being fed on the right.
Yeah, once you saw Citizens United allow unlimited money come into politics, and once the unlimited money figured out how it could hide its identity, so that you see a phony baloney ad on your screen from, Americans for Peace and Puppies and Prosperity, and you look it up and it's a front group with a, mail drop. But they've somehow got the money to run an ad on your TV about politics. Once that all happened, then you began to see Congress statistically in ways that academics could look at and quantify and write peer-reviewed studies about, stop representing the American public at large and start delivering for big special interests. And the people have noticed.
Yeah. And this is why I come back to your
institution. It makes them mad.
This is why I come back to your institution. The Senate seems to be the place where all progress for working people goes to die. And I'm looking at the Voting Rights Act right now. I'm looking at Build Back Better right now, and all the things that could do to help make people's lives better. This is what's important. Got to get something done. There have got to be things that people see as, hey, this made my life better. All of my rhetoric about Biden being the best pro-union president, the best pro-worker president, doesn't matter if people don't feel it in their paychecks.
Yeah, indeed. And there's no real reason to feel it right now because Congress has been contorted by all of this dark money, special interest spending, and we've got to break the back of it. And I'm hoping very much that now that the Build Back Better is going to have to be rebooted in some fashion, and now that we've had this, I think, terrible self-inflicted defeat with the Voting Rights Act, I'm really hoping that the Biden administration will now focus on what is behind all of this. They don't talk much about dark money. I think the president has only used the phrase one time in his entire presidency. But if you want to get the American people rallying around you and you can point out what's really going on, who was that radio personality who used to say the end of the story?
And now the Paul
now
Harvey. And now the rest
Harvey,
of the story.
Exactly. People want to hear the rest of the story, the thing that twists it, that clarifies it, that sort of brings the new reality to it. And I hope that Joe Biden becomes the voice against dark money and for the working people who the dark money enterprise is out to screw.
It is something that sorely needs to be done. Senator, I appreciate you taking some time. I hope you'll come back and as this continues and keep us up to date on what you're doing and how we can help, because more important than anything, we've got to get active. We've got to get involved. Appreciate the time, Senator.
And we need to call out the court that dark money built.
There you go. Great stuff. Thanks so much, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. If you got thoughts, you got questions, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Calling all builders, all welders and roofers, engineers and electricians. Calling all brick masons and boiler makers, steel workers and steam fitters. Your country is calling you to rebuild America, to create a cleaner, safer, more prosperous future for all. Tackling climate change, this is the job of our lifetime. It's time to build back better. Let's get to work.
It takes a lot to raise a family. A good job, a good salary, and some patience. A lot of people my age are drowning in college debt, but I chose a different path. I'm a member of the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I work hard for my job, and I love what I do. I had a lot of choices for my future, but I made the best choice for my family. IBEW, the right choice.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the big news coming out of Virginia, evidently the office of the Virginia Attorney General, they've fired this investigator, Timothy Heapy, I guess it's his name, Heapy. He's one of the January 6th investigators. He was also one of the lawyers for the University of Virginia. He was one of the top lawyers there. And I look at this, and I have a lot of my liberal friends, a lot of my Democratic friends, who are losing their minds over how could they fire him? This is payback. This is payback for him being an investigator. Yeah, it is. This is how the game is played. This is why elections have consequences. This is why it was important for people in Virginia to get out and vote. And I think the sooner we learn that lesson, that elections have consequences, maybe the sooner we start showing up more often. And, I don't know, not voting for crazy people, just kind of a thought. Which is why this next election, we're going to need all hands on board. And like every election cycle, it's all about the young people. Can we get the 18, 20, 22-year-olds to care enough to come out and vote? Can we rile them up and say, hey, this is your future? And like every other time, whether it was rock the vote or vote or die, it didn't quite happen. But here to share some thoughts on how maybe we can do it this time, I've asked Jack Lobel to come talk with us. Jack is the communications director of Voters of Tomorrow, votersoftomorrow.org, their website. Jack, thanks for taking some time for us.
Thank you so much for having me, Rick. Happy to be here.
So, I look at this story coming out of Virginia, and I'm not particularly upset about it. The guy got fired. He was put in place by the former governor. This governor is saying, hey, we live in a patronage world now, thanks to Donald Trump. He's got to go. It is what it is. Elections have consequences.
Yeah, elections do obviously have consequences. I think we've seen from the Georgia runoff elections, which were obviously won by now Senators Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, and to the election of Joe Biden to the presidency, elections do have consequences. I think in each case, which is why I'm here today, young voters delivered those two elections. So really young voters did deliver the Senate and the White House to Democrats, which is why we are fighting so hard to turn out Gen Z voters to elect pro-democracy candidates. And I think elected officials on both sides of the aisle are seeing the benefits of speaking directly to Gen Z voters, of acting directly in the interest of Gen Z voters, because when they act in our interest, when they put our futures in mind, when they're taking actions, we realize that, and we turn out for them in turn.
Now, it's an interesting way of putting that, when they take your interests at heart. Right now, nobody on the Democratic side of the aisle seems to feel that they're being taken care of. In fact, I was just seeing some polling done that said, what was it? Something like 6 in 10 African Americans aren't happy with the president, and 6 in 10 wouldn't vote for him again, don't approve. And I'm going, why? Oh, because they don't feel like he's doing enough for them. Does this kind of enthusiasm gap, does this concern you?
I think it's tough. Our political system is so divided that it's tough for either side of the aisle to get anything done. But I think that young people are smart. Young people look at the facts, and young people know who is fighting for them. That's part of what we're trying to do at Voters of Tomorrow. We're trying to make sure that young people know that the pro-democracy coalition is the right way to go. We're not in favor of electing authoritarian governments. Young people voted, 91% of young voters of color voted for Senators Ossoff and Warnock. It's those kind of numbers that we're trying to turn out to help elect pro-democracy candidates. And 91% of voters realized how high the stakes were in Georgia. And we think the stakes are just as high in 2022.
I would argue they're probably higher now, because there are some who are saying, and I don't know if you'll agree or disagree, that this could be the last free and fair open election that we'll have in this country. I don't like to be so hyperbolic, but looking at 19 states passing 34 laws to restrict people's access to the ballot box, a lot of it pointing at young people, I got to wonder what the future does hold for all of us collectively.
Well, yeah, I'm a high school student, but it does not take a history professor or a constitutional law expert to realize that our democracy is in crisis. There's a lot of problems going on. Far-right governments are trying to pass legislation that makes it harder, particularly for young people and young people of color to vote. Young people in every group are the most likely to be voter disenfranchised, to have their votes disenfranchised of any racial group or ethnic group. And that really concerns me, because young people are turning out in record numbers in 2018 and in 2020. But if far-right governments realize our power, which they clearly are, if they realize our power, and if they take that information and then in turn they pass legislation that makes it harder for us to vote, it's going to be harder for young people to turn out, especially college students. They're targeting college students, and it's going to be much harder for us to deliver the same results in the youth vote.
Now, so you say you're a high school student. When I was in high school, it was all about partying. It was all about, whatever athletic I was involved in. It was about school. It was about, being, 17, 18 years old. Your generation's being kind of saddled with, some different challenges than my generation was saddled with. How are you taking it? And is this are you abnormal in being as active as you are, or is your generation kind of tuned in this moment, knowing the gravity of the moment?
Rick, I mean, look at what's happened in the last 20 years. That's what we've grown up with. Those have been the events that have motivated us. So, my generation or a little older than us, we've lived through 2 global recessions, 20 years of conflict in the Middle East, a pandemic, what seems to be like weekly school shootings. And we have a greater degree of difficulty than a lot of other generations. We face these challenges. Some challenges are similar, but I mean, just like the pandemic, for example, these are things that are motivating us, but other generations have never seen anything like it. So I think our generation thinks and acts with the future in mind, is what I always like to say. We are dedicated to fixing immediate problems. So those immediate problems being unemployment, those immediate problems being fixing the state of the pandemic. But when I say we think with the future in mind, it means we're dedicated to fixing the systemic issues that are really, we look at our future and we look at our outlook on the country, and these issues like tackling wealth inequality, like gun violence, like climate change, these are the issues that we're really dedicated to fixing in our country. Because when we think about what our futures are going to look like, we got a lot of years here on this planet. I mean, I'm 17 years old. So I hope, but most of my generation, we're going to live for decades and decades. And then our children and our grandchildren, we're thinking about the future we want to build for them. So, I mean, yeah, like I said, fixing the systemic issues is really what we're dedicated to, which is why I think my generation is turning out in record numbers. We are historically politically involved. Like you mentioned, I don't think I'm an anomaly. I think there are thousands and tens of thousands of students, young people like me who care about our country and who are getting involved in politics because we see no other option. We think we've been left behind by politicians who have put access to contributions and access to power over our futures. So Rick, we're taking things into our own hands.
No, and look, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking about all of the things that I remember when I was your age. When I was in school, we were the only, the fear of dying came from, is there going to be a nuclear fallout because the Soviet Union's going to bomb us, and we're worried about, mutually assured destruction. And that was never going to happen. And when you look back at it, but I think now to what my kids are going through, having to have drills on active shooter drills, and going, how insane is that? That there literally is an opportunity that they could go to school and not come home. And that's what your generation's been saddled with on a number of levels. And the climate being a huge part of it. Because as you said, you're going to be here a lot longer than I am. And what we leave for you might not be worth what's being left.
Right, which is why I think partially having Gen Z involved in politics and government is so important. Every community has their own shared experiences and perspectives and priorities, but our generation, especially like I mentioned, is growing up under particularly unique and chaotic circumstances. COVID is a great example. Climate change, gun violence, these are things that no other generation has lived through to the same degree. I think active shooter drills is a great example of that. So for that reason, because every community has their own shared experiences and identities, every community deserves representation in government, and Gen Z is no different. That's why Voters of Tomorrow, the work we're doing on our team is so important, I think, because people who can understand us, not just because they have children our age or grandchildren our age, but because they are our age, speaking directly to us. I think that's the importance of electing Gen Z leaders. And now I'm not just talking about having young people involved in politics. I'm talking about electing Gen Z leaders here. That's why I think that's so important.
No, I got to tell you, take this however you're going to. I listen to you, Jack, and 17 years old with the kind of grasp on reality that you have, it gives me hope that there may be a future. Because I think back to my 17-year-old self. I was politically active. I did, worked on campaigns and did stuff, but not to the level and to the engagement that you are. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Jack Lobel. Jack is the communications director of Voters of Tomorrow, votersoftomorrow.org, the website, if you want to take a look at the work that they do. What if, if I was a 17-year-old now and I wanted to get involved in the things that you're doing and push forward on the issues that you guys are working on, how would I go about that?
Voters of Tomorrow, we have some great resources. You can check out our website, votersoftomorrow.org. But honestly, getting involved in your local political community is, I think, the first step that any young person should take. young people have the opportunity, a historic opportunity, to get involved in local politics, because I think we've seen that there's a gap where people should be fighting for us, but no one's fighting for us. So that's the importance of getting involved in your community. Local politics, I think, is, like I said, a great start. But I mean, Twitter presents an enormous opportunity for young people to use their voices, to tell our leaders what we care about. And Rick, I think, yeah, like I said, getting involved in politics as a young person has been so enriching for me. But it's really opened up a lot of doors for me to see what more I can do as a young person. I can't vote, but here I am talking to you about our priorities, because oftentimes a voice is louder than a vote. I mean, but combined, obviously, very powerful. So that's why we're getting out. We're getting young leaders to use their voices at protests, at marches, and also turn out in the historic numbers they've been turning out in.
No, I mean, it's about getting into the streets and getting out there. I mean, more than just being
Right.
on the keyboard and doing stuff. For me, it's about making people kind of uncomfortable. Make sure you check out votersoftomorrow.org. There are ways to get involved there at the website, I'm sure. Let me ask you this: in looking at the Biden presidency so far, we're a year in. I know a lot of people are, hey, they haven't gotten enough done. I think they've gotten a lot of stuff done in a short period of time, and we're a little stagnant right now. But I'm curious, as a 17-year-old looking at this administration, what's your assessment thus far?
I mean, what we're trying to communicate is that bills like Build Back Better, they do a lot for us. I mean, they're certainly a step in the right direction. They may not go as far as we want, but I think Joe Biden as a president has been fighting for Gen Z in ways that most other presidents do not. Certainly Donald Trump did not. I think Joe Biden fights with our future in mind. One thing I do have to say, we have been calling on the Biden White House to bring Gen Z directly to the table by establishing a Young Americans Advisory Council, which would bring Gen Z and millennial voices directly into the White House to advise Joe Biden on the issues that we care about. There was some Politico reporting recently that Joe Biden's listening to largely a wealthier and older inner circle when advising him on issues specifically around student debt relief. I think things like that, it's so important because it affects us the most to bring our voices to the table. And, Joe Biden has a historic opportunity to do that by establishing a Young Americans Advisory Council. So I think that's one thing that could be improved, but largely we've seen again and again that Joe Biden is fighting for young people's interests, and I'm very appreciative of that.
No, I got to tell you, Jack, you blow me away at your knowledge and your grasp of the issues and your ability to articulate them. Like I said, I'm not blowing smoke. I have hope in the future if there are more Gen Z folks like you out there. I hope people will take a look at the website, votersoftomorrow.org. You can also follow Jack on Twitter. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. Jack, I appreciate you taking time for us. Keep up the great work, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again at some point down the road.
Thank you, Rick. It's been my pleasure.
Good stuff, Jack Lobel. I look at this, and again, I keep coming back to the reality that, this kid's 17 years old. When I was 17, let's not talk about that because some of that stuff may still be criminal. I'm not getting in the middle of that. But the fact that there are people out there who are fighting like this and understanding the moment that in history that we're in, that there is a party in this country. The Republicans are doing everything they can do to block these kids and others from voting. It's not just minorities. It's people at the bottom. It's these folks. And I'll tell you, I'm frustrated. I'm angry. But, honestly, truthfully, I've got some hope, and the reality is, this kid makes me hopeful. It just is. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, the ricksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. If you missed any of it, it's all there for you. Whether you're on Apple, Google, iHeart, Spotify, any of those, Audible, any of them, just search the Rick Smith Show. They'll find it, or just go to the ricksmithshow.com and download the podcast. It is right there. But, and again, I come back to this moment. There is so much on the voting front that has to happen. And it makes me go, this is the time where we should be fighting even harder. And I agree with what Senator Coons said. He told ABC that he was gravely concerned about what was going on nationwide with the voter suppression. 19 states, 34 different pieces of legislation. He said, we made significant progress in making it easier for folks to vote in the pandemic in 2020. Why would we be rolling that back in a dozen states that the pandemic isn't over? And that's the question. You know, as we go into this next year, pandemic ain't over, folks. I know we want to believe it is. I know we want to think, it's in the past. Once Omicron goes down, we're going to be all fine. You know, I've got a doctor friend saying, we don't know what's coming around the corner. We're finding out more news that the therapeutics that we thought were going to help us now, not so much. And that the one thing that has helped most of all, the vaccine. Being vaccinated has helped. Is it going to stop you from getting Omicron? No. Might stop you from dying, though. And this is one of those things where you just go, I'm so thrilled that the next generation behind me, or, well, couple behind me, are at least sane and rational. If the one ahead of me has lost their mind. Just my thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show for working people on the talk.